Okay, so hooks and events. So we're going to do a general overview. We're going to look at hooks in Drupal 7 and 8 and even WordPress and JavaScript. And we're going to talk about YAML and annotations again, apparently. Then we're going to talk about just events in Drupal 8. So hooks and events. An event system is another pattern. It's another sort of generic PHP pattern. Well, it's actually a generic programming pattern that's applied throughout many different systems. So an event system, so the point of an event system is so that code over here, let's say you got your main system, it's this box right here, and then you've got this other code. And this code needs to be able to do stuff during the main system execution. So how does it know when to run, how does the system know when to run this code? What it is you have a communication concept between the two. You've got your big box, and it sends a signal that something has happened to the rest of the system, and then the rest of the system, when it hears a signal, can react to that event. So that's generally a picture of an event system, and it's made up with these concepts. You have subscribers, right? So you've got the rest of the system that's waiting for something to happen, and it is subscribed to a message or an event. And these are methods or functions that are waiting to be triggered. Or you have the event dispatcher. That's part of this big box system, and what it does is it basically sends the signal. So you can think about it being the mechanism that broadcasts the event. You have the subscriber registry, which is just a list of all events. A list of all subscribers to events. And you have the general context, which is sort of a vague notion of what data is sent along with the event broadcast. So in Drupal has two different types of hooks, and we'll look at the way they work next. But you have this type of hook called well, actually, it's just called a hook. But you have a hook that are based on function names. And the way you implement a hook in Drupal is you replace the word hook. You write a new function replacing the word hook with your module name. And so if we were working with the wacky module and I wanted to implement hook menu, then I would write hook wacky menu. And Drupal would automatically detect that function. And whenever the menu event was broadcast throughout the system, my custom hook, wacky menu, would be executed. And so that way the system can trigger code that's being contributed by other things. Another type of that is my pet peeve with Drupal's hook system. By default, they go in alphabetical order. Yes. Yes. No. Well. Yeah. So your module in Drupal, this is kind of a sidebar. Your module has a weight, and by default is 0. And all modules that share the same weight execute alphabetically in relation to each other. So if you want your module, not one hook, but if you want every single hook in your module to execute earlier or later, you change your module's weight. It's unfortunate. Yes, and another type of hook in Drupal is still called a hook. Hook's really a generic word that means event. Hooks and events are the exact same thing, conceptually. But we have an alter, and an alter expects to change some data that's passed into it. And WordPress has these exact same concepts. In WordPress, they're called actions and filters. But guess what? They're events, because some part of the system is dispatching this throughout the system. Some part of the big box is dispatching the init event throughout the system, and everything registered to subscribe to this event is executed. So in WordPress, the two different types of events are actions and filters. And they work the same except for what they expect you to do during those events. JavaScript's got the same concept, and it even calls it the word event. Yes? Yes?
So hook form alter, does that do any form?
Yes.
Within Drupal, or just the one in that? Is that
It does.
$sign form?
This specific one does any form in Drupal. So generally in Drupal, when you write a hook form alter, you'll say it gives you the form ID that's currently being passed in. And so what you'll do is you'll write wacky form alter, and the very first thing you'll do is say if form ID equal exactly what I want to edit, then you'll change it.
Okay.
That's a really common way to do things in Drupal.
Can it even reach into the admin?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So because the event form alter is dispatched on every single form. Yeah. So JavaScript has the same concept. It even calls them events. So now we're past the weird word hook, because hook means event. Here I'm showing you 7 different words that mean event. And this is how you do it in JavaScript. So when this element is listening for an event to be dispatched, and that event is the click event. Okay, so Drupal hooks are an event system. And if we talk about those different aspects of an event system, here's how that plays out in Drupal hooks. The subscriber is the function itself. Because when you implement a hook in Drupal, all of the Drupals, when you implement a hook in Drupal, the way you do it is you take hook, some event name is what it's always called, and you replace the word hook with your module name. And that's how you do it. So say in this example, my module is named example. So there is a hook called hook preprocess page, and my module, which is named example, is subscribing to that hook by defining a function. And Drupal is basically saying, if for each module in the system, if module name preprocess page exists, execute it. And that's how Drupal hooks work. So the subscriber is the function that I've written. The dispatcher is this function called module invoke all. That's how Drupal sends the event, or executes the hook. And the context is just whatever values are passed into this function and your hook receives. It can be one value, it can be a few. Just depends on the event itself. WordPress hooks are an event system. In WordPress, there's this extra step where you write a function that can be named whatever you want it to be named. It does not follow a pattern like in Drupal. But then you register that event explicitly by saying add action, the name of the event, and then the name of your function. Yeah. Right, yeah. There's some additional options there with add action. And then the event dispatcher is just another function that says do action, the event name, and you pass in some values that are valuable to the event happening, the context. So this is the event context. Just to sort of give some examples of events. Okay, so Drupal 8 has hooks, and it also has Symfony's event system, which is a whole new thing to Drupal. And that works a little differently. It's much more object-oriented. Here's a brief overview. You register, let's see. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to subscribe to an event. Let's say that Drupal is going to dispatch a useful event. And what we will do is we will write a class that implements the interface, event subscriber interface. And this interface says we must return an array of event names that map to methods on this class. And so this subscriber subscribes to every event name, and for each event name that gets dispatched, we will execute a method on this class. And then the way we tell Drupal about our subscriber is our event subscriber is actually a service. So we're back to services, and we just say, in our services folder, we'll say my event subscriber can be named whatever you want, the class, and then we tag it. We tag it with the tag that has the name event subscriber. And so this is why the services section came before the hook section. And so that's an event subscriber in Drupal 8. The event context, so the event context is actually a class that is written by whatever module or part of the system is dispatching the event. So basically in this example, if you were subscribing to an event, which is 9 times out of 10 what you're going to be doing as a Drupal 8 developer dealing with events, then the event context will be passed into this method that you said is subscribed to the event. If for some reason you want to dispatch your own events, as in, this is the same as in running your own hook that's within your module, then you would do it like this. You would define a new class that extends the event class. You'd have some sort of name that's available, and then the rest of this is sort of like whatever you need your event to know, the context. So some values. Maybe it's the current user. Maybe it is the current node. Maybe it's just some random word. But so the event class is as complicated as it needs to be. It basically just contains all the information that's relevant to the event that's happening right now. And then your custom module goes and gets the service called Event Dispatcher, and then you dispatch your event by its name and the class that you've just instantiated. This might be too far down the rabbit hole. So I'm just going to, any questions on this? You're not going to have to worry about this too much. If you're writing a custom module and you want to dispatch events, this is how you do it. It's just a few lines of code. But chances are, look it up when you need it. Yes. Oh.
Go ahead.
Yes.
This was one of the things that I've run into on this front was, is there a pattern you would recommend for handling like a large number of events? Like in different modules, I've seen like different methods. Some of them have a static class, and other ones constants in it.
Yeah.
Naming what the name of the event is. Another question is for like how to manage passing context into it, returning things back.
Yeah. So I think what they did is this that I'm showing now, where there's a constant with the event name actually on an event. I think that's like what they were doing early, and then it appears as I've seen modules develop, they've moved those. People seem to be preferring just a class that has constants in it. So it might just be called my module's event names, and and it's just like 4 constants. So yeah, I would say if I was writing something right now that I was going to contribute back, and I cared what people thought about it, because I mean, you want it to be sort of good, I would make it its own class with like just constants of event names. So, and also when I'm wanting to see like what's probably best, I like to look at the commerce guys' modules, because those guys know what they're doing. Especially the modules that start with the word commerce. Some of the other ones they're not as concerned about, but the ones that start with the word commerce generally have some really top-notch decisions in them. So yeah, and as far as like the context, the event itself generally, I guess I can't speak 100% here, but ideally, you're not asking for all the subscribers to your event to modify that context. It's more like, here's what's happened. Go forth and deal with this on your own. But I would try to avoid having everything modify the context if possible. But if not, there's certainly examples where you want all these subscribers to change the value of the context. In that case, what you do is in your event class, you'll have some methods called set. So like set some value. And then all your subscribers can choose to use that or not based on their own logic. So for example, if I had an event called calculator total, or calculation happening. That's an event, right? So I'm going to broadcast this event throughout the whole system called calculation is happening. And it's got a bunch of subscribers. And then on this event class, I would have a method. I would store a value, which is the total of my calculation. And I would have a method called set total. And then all the subscribers could choose whether or not to modify that on their own. And then afterwards, so since we're dealing with objects and everything is passed by reference when we're dealing with objects, and then afterwards, right here, the event context object, I don't have to expect it to be returned because this same object right here is modified, and I can get that new value after the event's been dispatched. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
I think just one thing to highlight on there, it is important to note for that to be true, you do have to pass the context as an event. So I think that's an exception in the array as well.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the dispatch services, but I assume that this has to be an instance of an event class. Like that your events that you pass in here, that I'm calling the event context so that it relates to all these other ideas, should definitely extend the Symphony event class. There's no reason not to. You were saying that you think it might can be an array?
Well, the first part you're passing the name of the event, and I think the event context after that are just parameters that are passed into it. So if you're not instantiating the event, the event dispatch is that by some name.
You mean I'm not instantiating the event subscribers? Because I am instantiating the event right here. Because I defined the context and set it up and prepare it for dispatch. Or, I mean, I could totally be missing another way to do this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Are you think that there's a way where it'll instantiate sort of a blank event for me? Because I'm not sure. To-do, look at that someday.
There's a lot of different patterns. Trying to research what I found, there's a lot of different patterns for it, and it doesn't seem like anybody's settled on a clear best practice.
Yeah. Well, in Drupal core, there's like 8 events, which is very disappointing. It's like they started. I don't know completely the history, but like they started to convert all the hooks to events back 2 or 3 years ago. Well, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And then they sort of balked and said, no, we're not going to change everything to events. We're going to keep hooks. And so in Drupal core, there's about, I think there's probably something like Drupal events, 8. Symfony, since the event system is a Symfony concept, Symfony's HTTP kernel leverages events. So a lot of the events you see in Drupal are actually Symfony events. But contributed modules are catching on, and many more contributed modules are using events instead of new hooks. The common wisdom throughout Drupal land is if your module needs to implement a new hook or event, choose events, because events are the future, and hooks are just here for now. And that's why we're looking at events in this class.
I just looked up. I was lost. It does have to be an event class for that concept.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so when you're dispatching your own custom event, you'll instantiate that event. You'll prep it, you'll add some values, and then you'll dispatch it with the event name. And all the subscribers will get a copy of that. No, all your subscribers will get that class. It's not a copy.
So real quick, the
Yes.
previous subscriber, previous one, at the bottom there, public function, some method. Okay, that's going to actually be a function, right?
Yeah, so this is a function. So what I did was I tried to keep this generic, and that might be like confusing it. So some event name will be whatever, commerce, checkout, complete. And then what I'm going to say is when that event happens, I want you to run the sum method on this class. That's the map. And so I need to define some method on this class.
Okay, I was in my memory that because I saw that last line in my memory, I was like, wait a minute, is that interface or something?
Yeah.
It's a full-on function, it just isn't written out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can have one subscriber subscribe to a dozen different events. It's just probably going to map to a dozen different methods. Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So here's the sort of the the future. Expect to use both hooks and events. Right now, I think I just said all this. There's kind of a few events in Drupal 8. There's many more hooks, but hopefully, and I say hopefully because I don't know, but hopefully the future of an event system in Drupal is Symfony's event style system, an object-oriented event system, not a hook system where you have to name your hook based on your module name, and you can't change the order without changing the order of your entire module. And I've read a lot of the. I've gone back and I've read a lot of the discussion about events in Drupal 8 for the past 5 years, and I think it's still technically up in the air. There's a lot of core contributors who are like, hooks are fine, and other ones are like, hooks are stupid. And so I guess it's yet to be seen what the future is. But I'm casting my vote right here and now. Put this on the record. Jonathan wants events. Yeah. And if you are writing something that you expect other things to subscribe to, choose events. That's my personal opinion. Go forth and choose events. And that is hooks and events. Any questions on those sort of concepts? I'm just sort of keeping track of time here. So if we look at that example that I just did, this is me subscribing to the hook user login. And I did that by changing the word hook to my module name. The context that was passed in to this hook by the system is the account. This is the user that just logged in. But I didn't do anything with that. So here's an example of a hook. I can do more examples of hooks if y'all are interested. And if not, do we want to do examples of events? Sort of compress all that up. Is anybody's brain? Yes.
How do you discover what events are there? Or what hooks are there? Or what hooks are there?
Yes, that's a great question. So let's.
I always see a lot of hooks in theme files.
Yes.
There's a lot of methods, so I always dig through to see what people are doing.
So the first way, and for me, the way I do it is I'm very lazy, and I let my IDE knows about Drupal. And so my IDE will start making lots of suggestions for me. But let me tell you how my IDE knows how to do that. So in Drupal, it's a common Drupalism to where when you're writing a module that has hooks, then you define a file within your module called modulename.api.php. So let's look at Node. I'm just going to pick one randomly. If y'all see another one you want to look at. Hey, look, Node has a node.api.php. So if I look in this file, this will tell me about all the hooks that the Node module fires. Hook node grants, which is about permissions to access a node. Hook node access records. and etc. So if I just go to some other random module, and this is the same with contrib modules. If I go to the responsive image, just sort of pulling one out of the hat here. So there is not a responsive image.api.php. So what that tells me is that responsive image does not dispatch any hooks. If it does, then somebody needs to file an issue because it is undocumented.
That's a best practice, not a functional requirement.
Yes, absolutely. It's best practice. It's not required. I could totally dispatch custom hooks without doing that, but I would be failing the community if I were to do so. So here are the hooks that are in the system folder. Just one, the system module. Right, because these are just documentation. They don't actually want to implement it. This hook is an example that doesn't fire. Yeah, what it means is that somewhere in the system, they are doing roughly the equivalent of module, invoke, all, system, themes, page, alter. And they're passing in theme groups. That's what all of this is an example. None of this code does anything. They could have written it like this and not giving you more an example. All this for loop stuff is just to further help you understand the themes group. So .api.php files are documentation. They're not executed by Drupal. Let me just undo all that. Does that help?
Is there one, like, as far as a comprehensive listing, like, hey, you know, this is available, so you can see what kind of functionality you want to work with. So that could exist somewhere else.
Yes, yes. So I would say at some point you get into like just searching the code base. So I'm going to find in all of Drupal function space hook underscore. And if I open that up, here's every hook that is defined in a function in an api.php file. But also, this is available on the internet. You don't have to do it this way. There is api.drupal.org, and I think it even has an autocomplete. So the first thing you need to do is select what version of Drupal you're dealing with. But if we were to say hook user login, so here's some user-related hooks that are part of Drupal 8. So this is probably like the better. This is what Google is going to return in your search results for hooks. But also, if you want to just dig into the code, you're always welcome to search for function hook underscore. And somebody talked about finding events. I mean, I do this sort of stuff all the time. I'll just go to the top level. I'll say find in all of Drupal, and I'll say extends event, because I know how events are made. They extend the event class. So if I just search for extends event, well, here is every event that's within Drupal. And a lot of these you'll see are actually in contributed modules. Contrib commerce, contrib devil. If I go to, why don't I search just inside the core folder? Extends event. It looks like we've got 19. And half of those are for the migration, for migrating. So yeah, that's how I find stuff. Personally, I mean, between Google and searching the whole code base for a pattern that I know to be true, like if I wanted to find, I mean, that was a fairly decent example, but if I wanted to find all, let's see, if I wanted to find every module that used my custom service, I would search for my custom service name. Just basically, that's one way to discover more about Drupal. All right. So we talked about hooks and events. And we didn't, so I talked, all right, here's where we were. I was using this hook in the other example. Do y'all want to see other hooks? Yeah, I can do an event. So let's find an event. I'm going to look in core for extends event. Config or nothing. So I've got this config CRUD event. Oh yeah, and it stores its event names in a separate class. So I'm going to cheat because I've already done this research for a blog post once, and I'm going to find the event name in my other code. There we go. This all right, here we go. So the event name was config event save, config events delete. That's good enough. Basically, this is for when some configuration item is saved or deleted. And let me show you what that looks like in Drupal. So in Drupal, whenever you enable a module or disable a module, Drupal's configuration system makes a modification and saves those changes. So this is a pretty easy event to show off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say that whenever I save this modules page, or whenever I enable or disable a new module, I want to fire some sort of message that just says, hey, this event happened. Pretty simple, right? Well, I said right and moved on. Does that sound fine? Okay. So I'm going to make a new folder inside of my module, inside of the sources folder. And I'm going to put this folder, I'm going to name this folder event subscriber. It's sort of the common practice, but not necessary that it be in a folder like this. Because, as we know, I hope by now, this is more about auto-loading than it is a requirement of the system. Because I'm going to make a new event subscriber called, we'll call it module save, module enabled. There we go. Subscriber. Boy, we're getting good at this. All right, so I've got my namespace, which must match the pattern, which is Drupal, wacky, event subscriber. I think that matches right. Source event subscriber, yep. And my class name is module enabled subscriber, and I believe, yes, it implements the interface event subscriber interface, which is provided by Symfony. I'm just going to hit tab and let that do the magic for me. So what this did for me is it said use, so bring into scope, import the Symfony component event dispatcher event subscriber interface. And now I've said that my new class implements that interface. And so that interface defines a strict contract. I've got a squiggly red line, which means I have not met the terms of that contract. And there's a couple ways for me to do this. I can have PHPStorm automatically fill in what I must do, or I can just sort of click on this and see what it requires of me. So here's the interface itself. It has a namespace, and it's got a whole lot of text, and basically says I must define a public static function named event subscribers, event subscribe, get subscribed events, and that must return an array. And there's a few more secret requirements in there, but that is what the interface is telling me. All I have to do. So let's do that. I'm going to do it manually. So I'm going to say public static function get, and this is PHPStorm's totally helping me out here. Get subs, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to type it all out. Get subscribed events, takes no parameters, and it should return an array. Boom. I have met our contract. take that event subscriber interface. And now what I want to do is I just want to name some event name, which I cheated and looked up as config crud event. No, config crud event. No, that's the actual event itself. I need to re-cheat. I don't remember what it was called. Config events, plural. There we are. Config events. And the save event. And so my editor just did more magic for me. It added the import use Drupal core config events. So that I can use the shortened version of the name here. So you see how namespaces are paying off? So whenever this event fires, which is just some string, and I'll prove that, we're gonna run some method name that I'm gonna make up. Let me click through and see what this is. See, the constant save on the class config events is just some string called config.save. People use constants for convenience. It's not a requirement. I could absolutely do config.save. This will work. So now I'm going to make up a new function. I'm going to say, and now this import isn't being used. That's not a good way to do it. But does that prove the point that that works? That all we care about here is the value, which is a string. And I'm going to go back to the more better way. So I'm going to say that when this event is dispatched throughout the system, I'm going to run a method on my class, my subscriber here, called did config save. Actually, config did save sounds more clear, right? Config did save. Boom. So the only last thing I need to do is write a function, probably public, called config did save. Now this function, whenever the config crud save event is dispatched, my subscriber will execute this method, which I totally made up. And this will I'm just going to use the messenger again because it's easy. And I'm just going to say, oh, well, actually, I don't even need to make a new thing here. It's just add message config totally save y'all. There we are. Oh, we're in double quotes. We're going to throw a single in there. Yeah. It's totally worth like $70 a year?
The first year, and then after that, it's like 70.
Yeah. I mean, considering this is what I do for thousands of hours a year, it is worth $70. So there's that. And in an ideal world, I would totally write more comments and I would explain what this is doing. But here's my subscriber. Now all I need to do is actually hook my subscriber up to the event system, and I do that as a service. So I'm going to say my config crud save subscriber is part of this class, Drupal wacky whack event subscriber. What did I name it? God, boy. Enabled sub. It doesn't want to, I wish you would help more on this page. Subscriber. Yeah, that's it, just the name. Module enabled subscriber. Module enabled subscriber. Event subscriber. That all looks right. Okay, and I just need to tag this thing. And did I say it's tags plural? Is that right? Makes sense that it would be plural, right? Let me double check this. Yeah, plural. And the tag is just some item in the list, which is an object of name, event, subscriber. There we go. Okay. So I wrote this subscriber, which is a class, and then I hooked it up to the system using services. This should work. And the way we're going to try to see if it works is I am going to flush the cache, and then I'm just going to enable some module. And that should trigger the config crud event save. So flushing the cache, I'm not exactly 100% sure that's necessary, but I'm 99% sure it's necessary because Drupal is not going to read every services.yaml file every single page load. It's totally going to be caching that somewhere. All right, so I cleared the cache, so hopefully now it's found my event subscriber, and now let's just enable something like no, that's a weird one, not that one. Let's enable address, sure, that's just a field that doesn't do anything for this example. So enable the address module. Wish me luck. If it doesn't work, you get to watch me debug. Hey, the config totally saved, y'all. There it is. I wrote an event subscriber. Any questions about this? Any other examples y'all want to see?